Hi everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about histamines. So, I have to admit that I haven't ever thoroughly looked into histamines before. I have been looking at it as one thing of the puzzle when I've been trying to figure out what the heck is going on with my sinuses, but I quickly kind of dismissed it. So, at one point, I was wondering if I had a histamine problem because I have had allergies since I was about 12. I developed them cats first, I think, and very shortly after that, I got pollen allergies, etc. And my sinuses are permanently blocked, mostly when I'm sleeping, when I'm laying down. But last last couple of years, actually, after I moved to New Zealand, so I think part of that could be the different flora that is here as well. But they've not been quite great even when I'm standing up or moving, etc. If I'm doing exercise in the moment, they are usually fine. But as soon as I stop, not so much. So if we have a look at the typical histamine sensitivity reaction that we get, I don't really have those signs, but when you have an allergy, you do have a problem with histamines. There are too many histamines in the system released for some reason. In my case, that might be pet dander or pollen, etc. So when we look at the typical high histamine foods, which are the ones that could be a problem for me or for many others, I have never actually been a huge consumer of any of them. Well, maybe some of them if we count chocolate, maybe, but for many years I've been trying to kind of limit that. So when I've been thinking about removing high histamine foods, the only high histamine foods that I have been consuming a you know decent amount of probably smoked meat products. Like back in Sweden, I probably ate smoked ham, etc. Here, I'm probably eating more salami. So that could be one thing. And chocolate or cacao products in general can be high in histamines as well. So that could be the second one. So I have done elimination diets in the past, which I would consider being lowish in histamines, but I never really saw any difference, to be honest. So I kind of wrote it off as this is not my problem. But as part of my journey to clearing up my sinuses, I have started to look into this again. And I don't, as I said, I don't generally tend to have the typical histamine intolerance problem in terms of symptoms that I would notice with my sinuses anyway. So my sinuses are rather permanent blocked, but not from mucus. And when I'm suffering from pollen allergy, when I get the seasonal allergy, I get a totally different response. So then I will get the typical runny nose, the sneezing, the itchy eyes, etc. But I don't have that ongoingly. One thing that I do have ongoingly, so I'm eating antihistamines every day, and I have been doing so for I don't know how many years, because if I stop, nothing changes with my sinuses, but I do get itchy on my legs. So that is telling me that there are too many histamines in my system, because otherwise I wouldn't be itchy. So there's clearly something going on there. So I still haven't found the cure for myself, and I'm still actually at a loss with myself right now, as I can't see that I would be consuming many foods containing a significant amount of histamines that would overload my system. I think that might be part of the problem, maybe, but I do think that I'm having a reaction to many other things, maybe. And as I'm recording this in just a few hours, I'm actually going to talk to Stephanie Keto person, and she's pretty good at histamines, I think. So I'll just present this problem to her as well. So when this is, I still haven't spoken to her, so I'm going to post this before I post that video, which I'll probably do a couple of days after this. So we'll see if she has anything to say about that. So I have tried fasting up to 7 days, and I've done a strict carnivore diet, which is pretty much meat and salt for 15, 16 days before I got insane. And I didn't really have any improvement in my sinuses whatsoever. I have come to the conclusion that either I need longer fasts, several fasts, over a period of time. I'm being very strict with my diet in between there. Several week-long fasts, maybe longer than that. Or histamines in foods really isn't a problem for me because I do not consume many of them anyway. So having said that, if you do have a histamine intolerance, fasting has been shown to decrease histamines in all tissues but your gut. And this is not actually a bad thing, because it turns out that the histamine that is released during fasting in your gut is actually released into your bloodstream, where it will go straight to the liver pretty much, and it will trigger the H1 histamine receptor on your liver, which in response will trigger the formation of a fat-derived molecule called, let's see if I can say it, oleoethanolamide, OEA. God, that word is doing my head in. So what this does is that it will actually stimulate ketogenesis. So it will help you produce ketones and get into ketosis. So histamines are not all bad. As many things in our bodies, we have them for a specific reason. And it's just when things are, when we get too much of them or when things are going wrong, that they're not actually good for us anymore. The same thing with the dreaded cholesterol. Now, I don't think cholesterol is to blame, but, too much of anything can be problematic. Same thing with blood sugar. We need blood sugar to stay alive, but we don't need too much of it. We need insulin for a lot of things, but not too much of it. So we just want to, have the physiologically optimal amount in our bodies, basically. So even though I couldn't, so far, find a cure for my own sinuses, I wanted to make this video for you guys, in case some of you would either benefit from it yourselves, or maybe someone that could benefit from it, or maybe someone watching this will actually have a clue about what's going on with my sinuses. And if you do, please let me know. So currently I am on a meat-based diet with some blueberries a few times a week. I don't eat dairy right now. I do have clarified garlic butter. And when I'm clarifying my butter, I'm being very meticulous, so there's absolutely no milk proteins in there at all. And none of this seems to have affected my sinuses so far. Still early-ish days. It's the 13th of February as I'm recording this, so this will probably not air for another few days. But I feel great doing this diet. But there is a level of frustration with nothing improving in my sinuses. And it might be that it just takes a very, very long time. So I'm still going to keep going with it. I'm not going to focus too much on my sinuses, but if someone actually knows something and you have a solution for me, please let me know. So let's have a look at this then. Histamines, you might not even know what they are. You might even have heard about them. But histamines are basically a chemical messenger that, when we think about it as being stored in granules in our mast cells, which is part of the immune system. And when they're getting triggered, they will release histamines. So that will trigger an inflammatory response, if you like. And histamines can also be found in foods. And generally, they are found in foods because there are bacteria that have been producing them. So when you leave, if you're cooking a fresh steak, it will be fine to eat. If you leave it in the fridge for one day and then eat it, you'll probably have a much higher level of histamines on that piece of meat because there's some bacteria on it and they will have produced histamine. So different foods contain different concentrations of histamine, and obviously one steak compared to another left for 24 hours, they're probably not going to contain the same amount. So it's really hard to, know how much, but there are a few things that you can think about when you want to lower or minimize your histamine intake. There will be histamine in pretty much everything, but that shouldn't be a problem necessarily. And all tissues, pretty much, as far as I know anyway, in your body have some sort of histamine receptors on them. And so depending on what type of receptor and how many of those receptors you have, you will get a different type of response. So histamine mediates inflammatory and allergic reactions. So if you have a problem with histamine, it may not be very obvious, but it may be that it just promotes chronic inflammation. And that might be what is going on with me, but I don't know. And then you don't necessarily have any specific problems. Now, obviously, I have a sinus problem, but I haven't noticed anything when I'm trying to reduce it because I'm already quite low in my dietary histamines. So this could be a reason also for why some people they eat well, but they can't lose weight on that diet. They feel pretty good, but they're still being inflamed because they have histamine intolerance, for example. And they don't need to get the rashes or the runny nose, etc. It's just an inflammatory response. So if that's you, you might want to try to go low histamine for a while and see if anything happens. It may or may not help. Anyway, some foods are high in histamine, naturally, because they just are. Other types of foods are classified as something called histamine liberators. And that is because they are triggering your own mast cells to release the histamine that they contain. So both of these type of food groups will contribute to your personal histamine load, but in different ways. And then there's a third group that I need you to pay attention to as well, and that is the diamine oxidase blockers, or DAO blockers. And these are the foods that blocks DAO, which is an antihistamine basically. So it will act in your body by blocking your histamine receptors from being triggered. So histamine can't bind to them, and then you won't get the response. And there are so many things that could trigger your own histamine release. Things like just like heat and cold, both of them could do it. Any kind of trauma, microbial toxins, so if you're infected, obviously, venoms from whether that be snakes or insects or bees, whatever. Yeah, there are plenty of things that can trigger your own histamine release. For me, it's actually better this morning, but I had like a huge bite here. I got it 2 days ago and it's still there. When I was a kid, I got massive, I'm talking massive mosquito bites. I'm still getting much larger reactions or bites than most people, but not the way that they were when I was a kid. And for some reason, the mosquitoes are also drawn to me. They love me. So my mom loves sitting next to me in summer because she doesn't get bitten. They all go to me. Very convenient for some. Anyway, so our bodies have 4 different types of histamine receptors, and I'm specifically going to show you what is happening when histamine receptor 1 and 2 are triggered, because those are the 2 that we're most interested in. So that's H1 and H2. We also have H3, which is a presynaptic autoreceptor. So what that means is that it's located on a presynaptic in the membrane on a presynaptic neuron or nerve cell, and it's serving as a negative feedback loop for that particular neuron. So if there is enough histamine, it will basically shut off histamine production in that neuron to not overstimulate the nerve. So that is pretty much not very relevant to what we are talking about here. And H4 is a different story. H4 is mainly found in bone marrow and on immune cells. And to some degree, we have some in our oral epithelium, actually, which is in our mouths. So its role in general is to act on eosinophils, which is a different type of immune cells. We're not really interested in that. And also mediate mast cell chemotaxis. So it's telling the mast cells where to go by releasing different chemical signals so that the mast cells will migrate towards that. So there is actually a lot of research going on or being done on this receptor because they believe that it does play a role in the pathology of asthma and allergies and chronic itching and then autoimmune diseases as well. So it might not be the sole cause of them, but they think that by blocking it or modulating it to some degree, they might be able to deal with these conditions better. So what it does is that it basically increases the number of immune cells, and it can therefore also contribute to ongoing chronic inflammation. So since I have allergies, I say I have asthma, but I've never had bad asthma, but I do have it to some degree. I haven't even had any medication for years, but if we go back looking through the record, I'm probably asthmatic, and I can sometimes feel if I'm out running, I'm really using my lungs. I get a lot of phlegm going on, so I'm needing to cough, and it's hard to breathe, but I'm not to the degree that I would die from it, as far as I know, because I'm here. What's it? Chronic itching. I just told you that if I'm not taking my antihistamines every day, my legs start itching, and that would chronic itching is if it's an itch that goes on for more than 6 weeks. So I definitely have that, and yeah, my sinuses. If that is because of chronic inflammation, that's probably why. So if I'm using a normal nasal spray in my sinuses, which actually constricts the blood vessels, that's what it does, I'm fine. And inflammation in general dilates blood vessels. So all of these things related to the H4 receptor actually fit into me, but not so much the ones that are related to H1 and H2, which I'm going to tell you about soon. And those are the ones that we're more interested in when it comes to diet. So I have made a few slides for you here that I'm going to show with you. Just give me a second so I can get that up for you. Okay, so the H1 receptor can be found in peripheral sensory neurons, which means the sensory ones that you can sense. I don't know how to describe that. And they are usually in the skin, etc. And they can cause itching and pain. Mostly itching, but for some people, sometimes they cause pain. So that would go for me as well, I suppose. And the intestinal smooth muscle, where it causes constrictions and cramps and diarrhea, that sort of thing. So if you have that going on and you're reacting to what you think is a strange combination of foods, so maybe you have steak one day and you're fine, and maybe you have steak the next day, you're not fine. And maybe that was because you had left it in the fridge for a day or two. Maybe that's what's going on then. Your secretory mucosa, where it is causing mucus secretions, which is in your sinuses, in your lungs, all of those kind of things. So that's what's happening when I'm having an acute reaction to pollen, for example. Pulmonary smooth muscle, where it constricts the bronchiole, which leads to decreased lung capacity and asthma. So If it's working on your smooth muscles in your lungs, what I'm saying is that it will constrict it and it will be hard for you to breathe. So that's the H1 receptor, I think. Yeah. And then we have a mix of H1 and H2 in the cardiovascular system. So what that does then is that it's decreasing your blood pressure, and that might sound like a good thing, but it does that by increasing vasodilation. So it dilates your blood vessels, and that will mean that if you have a lot of volume in your blood vessels, you will be able to have a lot of blood there without moving it forward. So that will increase your heart rate to push all that blood forward to actually maintain the circulation. If you have very narrow ones, your heart rate, your heart doesn't need to beat a lot to get the blood through, but it needs to be very strong. So that depends. You can get an increased heart rate because your heart is not strong enough to pump it through. That's why we don't want too constricted or too dilated blood vessels. And then you also have this mix in the skin, where it will also cause vasodilation, increase permeability and leakage of fluids and proteins into the tissue. So that means that your blood vessels are very leaky, and you can have proteins coming in there that shouldn't be there, and that since they shouldn't be there, you might get an immune response to that, and that's when you're getting the itching, and you might get swelling, etc. And that can be pretty bad. If you get hives, sometimes you can get, things just swelling up properly and looks really red and angry, that sort of thing. So that could be the mix of those two. And then we have the H2 receptor, which mainly is found in the gastric area in your stomach. And what it does there is it binds to, or these receptors are on your parietal cells, which is the cells in your stomach that produces and secretes hydrochloric acid. So if it binds to the H2 receptor on these cells, what will happen is that they will overproduce acid, and you can actually get heartburn, or even worse, you get stomach ulcers because you're producing so much acid that your stomach can't actually keep it up and produce new cells to patch these holes up. You will burn a hole in your own stomach. I don't have any water here. Right. So if you have, what symptoms would you have if you have histamine intolerance? Could be quite good to know. So most people that have seasonal or pet allergies will have some sort of histamine intolerance. That's me. It could also be in PCOS. There is research done on that area, which is interesting. If you have low testosterone, for example, you might want to look into this. Excess mucus production, if you're always having a runny nose or that sort of thing, that could absolutely be it. Itchiness, it's me. If I'm not taking my antihistamines, I have some friends that they're so itchy that they are scratching their bodies and they're bleeding and it's horrible, and they just get all these scabs all over their legs or wherever they are itching. Probably a histamine problem, and that's awful even though they are eating antihistamines. So I'm kind of lucky. If you get yeast infections, and that could be recurrent yeast infections in your groin, on your feet, any other area, wherever on your body, as in fungus, then histamines could be the cause of that. Frequent loose stools and gas. So if that is an ongoing problem for you, and let's say you cut out gluten and everything that you think is offensive, maybe even dairy, and you're still having that problem, maybe have a look at the histamines as well. Eczema and or psoriasis could be caused by this as well. So let's move on. So I listed a few high histamine foods. So these are the foods that are high in histamine naturally. So you should avoid them if you want to eat a low histamine diet. I'm just going to read the list. You can probably see it yourself, but alcohol, pickled or canned foods, so that goes for anything pickled or canned. Fermented foods like sauerkraut and salami. Mature cheeses, or actually any cheese, but mature cheeses are worst because they have been there for much longer and then be subjected to more bacteria, and they can therefore have more histamines in them. Smoked meat products, shellfish, fish, unless you just caught the fish yourself. So the problem with fish, even when you buy it fresh, is that it's not just fresh. It's not fresh. They catch it, they put it on ice, which is good, and then they transport it to your supermarket, and it might still be on ice, but it's still subjected to, the environment, and you will get more bacteria on it, and they will start producing histamines, etc. So when we're talking fresh fish, we're talking fish that you catch yourself and you eat pretty much straight away. I don't want it to lay around for 24 hours or such, which is usually the case, or a lot more than that when you buy it in the supermarket. If you are, let's say you are in a little fishing town or wherever, and you go to the market in the morning and you know for sure that they caught the fish that morning, that's also fresh. That's totally fine. Beans and pulses, I know most of you on this channel probably don't eat that sort of thing, but they're high in histamines. Nuts, chocolate or cacao or cocoa. Vinegar, ready meals or previously cooked meals. So this is what I'm talking about with the old meat. If you cook it and you don't eat it until tomorrow, you will have some sort of increase in histamine on that. So just make sure that everything is fresh and that it's freshly prepared. And I just wanted to be really clear about the canning. Anything that is canned, it is sterilized, it's put in there, and it should be fine, but it doesn't mean that it's fine with regards to how much histamine is on this. So just avoid it all. And then we have the histamine liberators. So those are the foods I told you about. When you eat them, they will trigger your own mast cells to release the histamines that they have stored. And they have them in little vesicles, so they will just like pew, release a bunch of them straight away, like one of those smoky mushrooms that you step on and you just get a cloud of things. That's how it works, pretty much. So that would be any citrus fruits, kiwi, pineapple, plums, papaya, and raw egg whites, but not cooked ones. So for those of you who are asking, is it okay to eat raw egg whites? I usually say it's fine as long as you have the raw yolk with it, because that will kind of take away the effect from avidin, or it doesn't take away the effect, but it doesn't deplete your nutrients because the egg is pretty well balanced. But if you are looking for a low histamine diet, then that's probably not the best idea. Tomatoes, wheat germ, additives, different additives, and I've just listed a few: benzoate, sulfites, nitrites, glutamate, and food dyes. And I'm sure there are more additives there as well. Right, so last one, diamine oxidase blockers. So this would be things like alcohol, black tea, energy drinks, green tea, mate tea. So we're looking at caffeine here maybe, and other things. So you really do not want to do this, because that was just, it's your natural antihistamine in your body, and you kind of want that to be there, and it's there for a reason. And when you're messing with such things, when you're taking in, so if you look at these: alcohol, black tea, energy drinks, green tea, mate tea, you might think that some of them are natural, but we have pretty much processed all of these. It's not like we find tea as it is, the way what we're drinking, and we actually ferment it before we drink it, etc., and then we dry it, blah blah blah. So what you could do instead is, just if you want to drink something, just have herbal tea or something. Other things that you can do is that you want to support your gut, and you want to make sure that you get enough sleep. Those are two things that are really important as well. So If you want to have a daily cup of bone broth, for example, that might be a really good thing to do because you're getting a lot of what do we call it? Collagen, gelatin, that sort of thing to heal your gut lining. You also get the minerals that you need, hopefully. And if you need to, you can add some glutamine, which is really helpful in terms of healing your gut lining. However, if you are insulin insensitive or resistant to some degree, you might not want to do this because glutamine can actually stimulate your insulin secretion. So just be a little bit careful and know about that before you start overdosing on glutamine. And with regards to sleep, I really do recommend that you go to bed at least 1-2 hours before midnight if you can. And if you go to bed 2 hours before, if you can fall asleep at least 1 hour before, that would be great because that will increase your chances of getting plenty of deep sleep. And deep sleep is when your body's healing the most. So you need that to restore everything, and that's where you get most bang for your buck, basically. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say on the topic of histamines. I realized that we're getting up to half an hour here, so I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, okay, please just subscribe, hit that button. You can also hit the bell if you like to get notified about whenever I'm releasing a new video or when I'm going online every weekend. And share it with all your friends that actually need this, because I think that there are a lot of people that could benefit from this. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, because we always appreciate that. And lastly, leave me a comment. Let me know if you have experimented with any of this before, or maybe you have the solution to my sinus problems, or if you have any more questions with regards to this, and I will try to address that at some point. So thank you so much for watching. Love you all. Take care, and I will see you soon again.